It is such an honor to be here. Again, my name is Netalina Nasserdeen. Good morning to everyone that's watching at home. Hopefully next year we see you. So as you heard, my name is Neta. I'm the founder and CEO of Rise Up For You, but I didn't start that way. So I actually used to be a performer. That was my first career. I used to sing and dance and tour around the world with musical theater. Anybody sing and dance? Don't worry, I'm not going to call on you. Okay, cool. And every time I walked into a room as a performer, I always stood center stage. Now, if you know anything about performing, you know that center stage is the place that you want to be. But the interesting thing is that I was never, ever the best singer in the room. That means that there was always 3 or 4 people that had better technique than I had. They had a 3-octave range. I had a 2.5-octave range. I started singing in my garage. They had parents that were celebrities. And they used to come up to me and they used to say, how do I stand where you stand? And I used to say, the only difference between you and I is your technique is actually better. I just walk into a room and I own the room. I communicate with the directors. I ask for feedback. I build relationships. Interestingly enough, when we went on tour, I saw the exact same thing happening on an organizational level. So a cast of 50 people, again, amazing technically. We were selling out shows, great marketing, but the biggest challenges that we had all came down to people. Poor communication, ineffective leadership, the inability to adjust our social awareness when we're in a new country, moving to a new town. A few years after that, I became an executive. I was 27 years old and I had 200 team members under me for an education corporation. And I saw the exact same challenges happening in the corporate workplace. Individuals that had PhDs, master's degrees, bachelor's degrees were getting in their own way of their success, and it was impacting their ability to communicate and to show up at work as their best. And we also saw this same challenge on an organizational level because companies are run by what? People. So I started to ask myself, okay, what makes some organizations more successful than others? What makes some people more successful than others? They have the same technique. They're the same organization. They do the same thing. But why is this company thriving and this one not? And we found that, of course, the majority of our success is not, in fact, made up by the marketing and the technical skill, but by the culture and the soft skills that your team embodies. Emotional and social intelligence. And that's what we're going to dive in today. Now, for many of you, you're like, yep, I got it. Emotional intelligence. I completely understand it. But in actuality, it's become a buzzword today. And many individuals have a very basic understanding of what it means. And we all need to understand the deep dive of EQ, because that is where the transformation in your company and your team will succeed and move forward. So we're going to dive into this today. I hope you have a notepad because I'm going to give you a ton of information. So just on a basic level, what is emotional intelligence? The capacity to recognize our own feelings, of course, to manage ourselves, and to recognize feelings in others and to motivate and influence others. Now, it was pioneered by 2 individuals, Peter Salovoy and John Mayer, not the musician, although I love him, and it became popular by Daniel Goleman. So if you go online right now and you were to type in emotional intelligence, you'll see Daniel Goleman pop up. He did an interview with Oprah. He did a TED Talk. So he really became the ambassador for it. So we understand that there's 4 pillars to this. And most of you probably understand this part, okay? The first pillar is self-awareness. And I'm actually going to break this down for you. That's all things self, okay? Just you. The second pillar is self-management. Now we move on to pillars number 3 and 4 that have to do with you and how you play with others. So that's social awareness and relationship management. But again, the challenge is most individuals don't understand or know that there's actually another 18 competencies that fall under this. And every challenge that you're experiencing in the workplace today with your team and with people fall under emotional and social intelligence. When people come to us and say we need diversity training, I say we start here. When people come to us and say we need communication, I say we start here because it all falls under EQ. EQ or EI, emotional quotient or emotional intelligence. So we're going to do a deep dive, but did you know that 75% of careers are derailed because of a lack of EQ? That's a big number. And I will tell you that when companies work with my team and they have to let somebody go, it's never because of their technical skill or that they don't do a good job at their job. It's always because of something that has to do with the human skills. They have a bad attitude. They're not motivated. They don't show up on time. They cause drama. They're constantly in conflict, or they're not leading with integrity. And so we have to let them go. Now, we saw this a few weeks ago at the Oscars, right? I'm not going to go any further than that. And we laugh about it, but the sad truth is that an individual that spent his whole life building a reputation in his profession, in 1 second of a lack of EQ, destroyed that on camera. Now, this happens every single day in the workplace, not on that extreme of a level, I hope not, okay? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to break this down. What are the 18 EQ competencies that you need to know? And those of you that are at home, follow us online. You can take screenshot. You can take pictures. Enjoy. So we're going to start with self-awareness. This is pillar number 1. I could talk about this for 25 hours straight. I wrote an entire book on it. These 3 competencies are the very beginning of any leader, manager, entrepreneur, anybody that is running a team. We have to start here. So I'm going to break down these 3 competencies. Emotional awareness, number 1. Do you have the ability to be aware of the emotions that you feel beyond the basic 7? Instead of saying, I'm angry, I'm upset, I'm happy, can you say, I'm frustrated because I feel unheard in the meeting and I feel unseen and negated? That's a lot more clear in communication than just, I'm angry. Because what happens when a team member says, I'm angry? Your next question is why, right? And then we need to get further into the emotion. So if you have an emotional awareness beyond the basic level, you're able to communicate on a different level that can provide more solutions. Meaning that we can't see everything about ourselves because we exist in our own skin, right? So accurate self-assessment is the way that you see yourself. Do people on the outside see you and view you the same way? So I'll give you an example. When I was 27 years old, as I mentioned, I was an executive. I had 200 people under me. I thought I was the best leader ever. I had an open door policy. I wanted to coach people, mentor them. Crickets. Nobody walked into my office. And then one day somebody said, well, you're kind of intimidating. I said, that's not true. That's your belief, not mine. And then another person said, well, you're not approachable. And I said, no, I don't think so. No, I'm approachable. So I decided to do an anonymous survey as an executive. Out of 200 individuals, 75% said I was intimidating, not approachable, and I looked mad all the time. I cried when I got that feedback. But I realized that even though on the inside I felt a certain way, and on the inside I wanted to coach and mentor and support my team, there was a disconnect on the outside. I had a blind spot. So my energy wasn't showing up that way, or I wasn't greeting my team that way, or I didn't have the warmth. So my assessment of myself was not accurate. And if I didn't do that survey, I would have continued to lead that way. So I started to make adjustments so that I can break that barrier between my team and I. Now, many of you probably have a ton of great leaders in your workplace, but also struggle with that same idea or concept that there's things about themselves that they can't see, but you can see. How many of us resonate with that, right? With our team? Yep. Okay. And the third competency, again, I can talk about this all day, is self-confidence. Self-confidence. So my team and I in 2021, we asked 2,000 working professionals, not furloughed, but in the workplace, what their number one challenge was. 83% said self-confidence. 83%. Imposter syndrome, perfectionist mindset, not feeling enough, struggling to raise their hand and take risk. That is a huge number. And we saw this magnified when COVID hit because so many individuals built what I call micro-confidence, which is a confidence in categories or competencies. You're confident at selling. Maybe you're confident at coding. I'm confident as a speaker. So we have a workforce and a culture that has built their value on these micro competencies. But what happens when something like a pandemic hits and now your job goes away, your title goes away, your money goes away, and all these things that you've defined yourself as go away, where your self-worth and your value go away too. And what we need to start building, not enough if they don't feel enough. So now when you give a team member feedback about that email, it's no longer about the email. It's about them, right? So being able to give feedback is going to be really critical for individuals to build that self-confidence. How many of us can resonate with the self-confidence piece, either individually or seeing it within your team? Right? Absolutely. It's a huge thing. So that in itself, that's just the first pillar of emotional intelligence. We didn't even get to the other three yet. So now we go on to number 2, that's self-management. So we have emotional self-control. Can you manage your triggers in the moment? Can you manage your stress in the moment? Do you have the ability to feel in that moment that something's happening and excuse yourself from a situation or talk yourself down in the moment so that you don't behave in a certain way? Competency number 2, transparency, also known as integrity. Are you the same person at home as you are at the workplace? Now, of course, you're going to behave a little bit differently with your loved ones, but are your values, your morals, and your basic ethos the same across the board? Or are you one person over here and another person over there? Third competency, the ability to adapt. And again, this is what we saw during COVID-19. We're also going to continue to see this as artificial intelligence comes into the play, right? Many individuals, their degree might not matter anymore because the skills have changed. Will they have the adaptability to pivot into a new industry or learn a new skill so that they can stay competitive? Competency number 4, achievement. A sense of excellence and standard within yourself that you have for yourself. I always say it takes just as much energy to play small as it does to play big. So we might as well play big. But there's too many of us in the room sitting, and even those that are watching, that play very, very small, and that's basically all you have, right? That's all you choose to give instead of playing big and taking risk. Number 5, internal motivation. So that's you are able to wake up in the morning and put your best foot forward simply because. Not because of a paycheck, not because your boss told you to, not because anything relies on it, but only because you are motivated to be yourself because you owe it to yourself to be yourself, best self, right? You understand that you deserve the best for you, and therefore you're motivated to wake up every morning and put your best foot forward. I run my own company. I have to have internal motivation because there's no boss or anybody that I have to speak to, right? I have to wake up in the morning. I have a team that I have to talk to. So there needs to be something more in me that's driven in the morning beyond anything else. And the last competency is optimism. Now, I always say realistic optimism because we don't want toxic positivity either. We don't want an entire workforce that's like, everything's amazing, because that's not true. But being able to see the challenges, look at the challenge and say, you know, we can find solutions to overcome that. There's possibilities beyond that and being able to move past that. Now, before we go on to pillar number 3, which is how we work with others, as you can see, these 9 competencies right here are most probably where your team is stuck. And I'm not only talking about entry level, I'm also talking about executives. We work with executives every single day, and when they come to us for support, this is where we start. And sometimes we spend 4 months just on these 2 competencies because, again, we can't lead our team. We can't build a positive culture unless that self-awareness and that self-management has been mastered to some extent first. Now we move on to competency number 3, social awareness. This is all things empathy, organizational awareness, diversity, equity, and inclusion, how you show up, your nonverbal cues. So there's 3 types of empathy, right? We have cognitive empathy. That means that you're able to understand what the other individual is feeling on a basic cognitive level. We have emotional empathy, which means that you feel so empathetic that you can actually feel in your body what that team member feels or what that client is feeling. Maybe you feel it in your stomach. Maybe you feel it in your shoulder. Then we have empathic concern, which is that you're so motivated or moved by what you're hearing. You have so much empathy that you're going to take action to do something. I usually relate this to nonprofit founders. Individuals that have so much empathy towards a cause or a situation that they build a nonprofit organization to support it, okay? Then we go on to organizational awareness. Can your team adjust their EQ based off of their environment, their team, their clients when they walk on site? I do this keynote at least 5 times a week. I do it different every single time because you're a different audience than the audience I saw a few days ago. So I have to have the organizational awareness to understand where are they sitting? Where's the predominant, audience sitting? Okay, what's the room like? Where's the PowerPoint? What's the energy? Are people excited? Did they laugh with Dr. Mark before I came out? How did they engage with the speaker right before me? All of those things matter because that's going to adjust how you show up in a room and how you shift your energy and your social awareness. Now think about it. Some of you guys are running companies that are remote and you have clients that are overseas. That means that your team has to have the ability to talk to one client maybe in Europe and then switch their environment, right? Switch how they show up with maybe a client that's in Japan because there's different awareness that happens there. It's also the same thing around diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Being aware, understanding what are some things that I can say to this individual that maybe won't fly with this individual because of culture. All of those things come down to pillar number 3, social awareness. And of course, the last competency, adding value. So having a service-oriented mentality. Now, most of you here have that, which is why you're in the industry that you're in, right? Because you believe in people and you want to provide service. And that's why you're here at this conference. Now we go on to the very last pillar, and that is relationship management. That's all things leadership. But you can see how difficult would it be to lead your team, to coach and mentor them, to manage conflict, to build trust, to develop others, to influence, to manage conflict, to have teamwork if the first 3 pillars aren't intact. Right? So I'll give you another example because I think stories are really helpful. When I was leading my team of 200, the one thing that really bothered me is when somebody would ask me a question when I was running a meeting. When somebody would say, "Why are we doing that?" My response would be, "Because I said so. I'm the boss and that's what I said." Now, obviously, that's not the great response, right? The best response. But because pillar number 1, self-confidence, and pillar number 2, that question made me feel like I didn't know what I was talking about. That question made me feel like they were negating me or trying to make me look bad. It never dawned on me that maybe they just wanted more information. Maybe it has nothing to do with me as a leader, but maybe they just want to know more about why we're pivoting or why we're making a shift. But you see, because pillar number 1 and 2 weren't exactly where they needed to be, pillar number 4 was suffering. Because my response and my communication and my behavior with my team wasn't what it needed to be to create a safe space where they can ask questions. And when I learned that, I needed to pivot really fast. So we're going to jump in a little bit more, and here's what I would like you to do. I actually want you to just rate yourself in these competencies, because I'm all about not only empowering and giving information, but also having strategy to do something about it. So remember, I went through these competencies and I showed you that the first step is really accurate self-assessment. So where do you stand with these competencies that I just showed you? So what I want you to do is assess your blind spots. We're going to take 1 minute right here. You can take a screenshot. For those of you that are at home, you also have this PowerPoint and you can assess yourself at home. I'm going to give yourself 1 through 10. 10 being amazing. I'm amazing in this competency. Danger zone, non-existent, okay? And then everything else that's in between. So go ahead, take a screenshot, and just look at these competencies, and I'm going to go through them really fast with you. Self-talk. This is all the stuff that's in your mind. Is it positive or is it negative? So these first 6 on the top row are all self-awareness. So how do you talk to yourself? Do you have kind languaging with yourself, or do you constantly put yourself down? Number 2, labeling emotions. 1 through 10. How well are you at labeling the emotions of what you feel beyond the basic 7? The next one, accurate self-assessment, which is what we're talking about here. Do you think you're pretty close to what other people would say? If I were to ask you what you think about yourself and I asked another 7 people that know you, would it be the same? Would it be similar? How close would it be? Expressing yourself. So not only labeling the emotions, but being able to express it verbally to other people. Confidence, which we talked about earlier, imposter syndrome, breaking the perfectionist mindset, feeling enough, overcoming your self-doubt to take action. Realization of triggers. So when you do feel something, do you know why you feel it? Are you able to say, that bothers me because it has the same tone that my father had when he used to yell at me when I was a kid, and it bothers me? And being able to take it all the way back. Then we go on to that next pillar, managing your stress, internal motivation, realistic optimism, resilience, being able to bounce back up and forward when situations occur, controlling your reactions and growth mindset, understanding, like Carol Dweck has said, that your intelligence is not fixed, that you have the ability to learn anything if you choose to, and you see that you can. Now we go on to the next, empathy, active listening. That's challenging today with cell phones and technology. Removal of ego, being able to take yourself out of the equation as a leader so that you can truly hear what this individual is saying. Social awareness, acceptance and tolerance and nonverbal cues, how you stand, how you show. Do you have a resting face, right? I used to get told that I had a resting face. I had to work on that. Our arms, are they crossed? Are they opened? What's the energy that's coming from us? And then that last pillar, leadership, coaching, teaching, being solution-oriented, relatability, sparking transformation in your team and relationship building. I will tell you that many leaders think they're coaching and teaching when they're coaching and teaching technical skills. But as you saw with Dr. Mark before I came on, people want growth and development also on a human level, personally. They want to know that you care about them beyond the job description of whatever they're doing technically. And we work with a lot of leaders that say, well, we don't have time for that. Say, well, then you shouldn't be leading. Right? Because leading means that you are influencing and impacting your team, and therefore your team has to be a part of your time on a daily basis. Now that's challenging because as leaders, not only do you have to do your job, but that means that you actually have to make space and time to guide and lead your team so that they feel motivated and excited about the work that they're doing. Okay, so action step number 2. And again, all of you that are at home and those of you that are in the audience, you will get this PowerPoint and you can do this, is you're now going to send this to 7 people to take about you, for you. So you can actually see which competencies do I have a blind spot in? Or which competencies am I better than I realize? Sometimes we see leaders give themselves really low scores and their team give them amazing scores. That means that their self-confidence is struggling a little bit and we need to boost that. And there's times where we see the opposite. A leader will give themselves a 10 in empathy and their team give them a 4. Like, we got to work on that. That's a blind spot. Okay? So additional steps forward that you can take as an audience, okay, and as leaders that are in the workforce. Number 1, start with yourself. Great leadership always starts with personal leadership. Build your personal EQ and understand the importance of it. Because when you truly understand how emotional intelligence can impact your team and the workforce, at that point, you're able to advocate for it and help your team build that EQ. Step number 2, provide that team training on emotional intelligence so that you can help them personally and professionally. I will tell you, and I speak to this, I mean, yes, we have a company that does this, but I will tell you that when we work with companies, they come back to us every single time and they say, that emotional intelligence program has been a game changer for our company because we're speaking the same language. We're managing conflict better. We're communicating better. We all understand what our role is and how we behave, and we're able to pivot and adjust to our team, to our clients, to the organizations that we're working with. And lastly, remember that your people are the product, and your product is what helps you get that profit. So unless you start with your people, you're never truly going to maximize the success and the growth of your team. I always say that the greatest tragedy is wasted human potential. Don't let that be your story, and don't let that be your team's story. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. So before I leave again today, we always offer a free gift because that's a lot of information that we just shared with you. So if you scan that QR code, you will get, I think it's 12 videos completely free on self-confidence, emotional intelligence, public speaking, whole leadership, and you get 4 workbooks that are about 60 pages, all completely free. You can share it with your team. You can have it for yourself. But there's a lot of information that can really make an impact. And the one thing that we have to understand about social and emotional intelligence is that it takes time to build. I call it the EQ muscle that we have to train and build. If you go to the gym for 8 hours in one day, you're not going to see the same results if you went to the gym every single day for 30 minutes for 3 months. Okay, and it's the exact same thing with these skills. So though I love being on stage and sharing with you, I understand that this 30 minutes is just the tipping point and the touching point to create transformation and to hopefully elevate you into the future with your team. Thank you everyone for having me.